Okay, so our final animal for the Wetlands DLC is Hypsilophodon. I actually have a lot to say about this. I actually think this is really interesting, but let's check out the trailer footage first.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to welcome Hypsilophodon to the park.
Okay, so I don't actually have much analysis to say coming from the video specifically. I'll highlight a few things. I think looking at the animal, it cuts a slightly different profile than Drososaurus. This will be smaller than Drososaurus. Hypsilophodon is a good deal smaller animal. Um, and so you might have been concerned, with this sort of animal coming in, that maybe it would just be a scaled down trio. But the overall profile of the animal here is a bit different. He's got relatively thick arms compared to his little chicken legs there, and just like the head, neck, shoulders cuts a little bit of a different profile than Drososaurus. I think they've done a good job differentiating this animal. I think the pattern, if you see this Drososaurus here, the brown orange one, it looks like the pattern is kind of bad, and it is, but the color palette that they've applied to the pattern is quite good. This gradient of different colors across the back and head of the animal. Um, you can see there's also like a little eye spot that's a different color, like the color on the back of the spine there. Like the pattern color is saving this quite a bit. Um, this pattern, this like splotchy, broken up horizontal stripes pattern is very overplayed, especially on the small animals. I would like to see some different stuff there. But yeah, I think the color palette is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. In terms of hatchery, uh, looks like the batch size is 8, and the population limits are essentially nothing. This is pretty typical for a small animal, herbivore or carnivore, so nothing to really glean here that's interesting. Um, Dimorphism, not noticeable really. Looks like maybe something going on with the neck, or it might be the lighting that changes there more than anything, because this is very, I don't know. Like, this has much more stronger counter shading, whereas this one, the other one is dark underneath, so it's hard to tell, but maybe there's a little bit of difference in thickness. Maybe the male's got a little bit more of like a neck waddle thing going on there. Hard to say. Um, we'll mute this. Yeah, the nothing cool in the release animation, typical run out thing. Juvenile looks fine. Nothing blowing my mind on the juvie. I did like this. The little hop is very fun. Um, the Hypsilophodontids in the novels are kind of referred to as hopping around. So I like that he's got a little hop, even if he doesn't, bounce, bounce, bounce like a kangaroo all day. Which would probably be unreasonable to expect. Um, it would look weird. All right, so my comments on this. One, this animal could have had proto feathers. Let's see here. Does this, that's very large. That is not going to be the way to do it either. Well, there, we can see the one. Yeah, you could see them all. This animal could have had proto feathers. Hypsilophodontids, these ornithopods. Hypsilophodontids aren't actually a thing. These like basal ornithopods, let's call them that, like Drososaurus, are fairly often depicted with proto feathers, but there's no direct evidence they actually have it. At least not for Hypsilophodon. There are some relatives like what is it? Is it? I always mix up Eryctodromius and Orodromius, but we know one of those had like proto feathers and like naked tail, and so those are like related animals. So they could have easily done a feathering style like that for this animal. They chose not to. I think this was a relevant point to discuss because this keeps the Hypsilophodon much more in line with the depictions of 90s Jurassic dinosaurs. And I like this. This is a novel species. This was in probably in the original park alongside Jurasaurus and the Hypsilophodontid species count, and then it was confirmed for sure on Isla Sorna in the novel, which is why retroactively, it's very likely the Hypsilophodontids in the original novel included this animal alongside Dryo. I'm very happy to have a somewhat more retro take on the animal to keep it in line with a 90s Jurassic aesthetic, keep it in line with at least somewhat with the vibe of the Dryosaurus that we already have. I think this is great. This is what they did with the Stegosaurus as well, of course. When we got Segi at the end of JWE2, it was not actually a particularly accurate representation of a Coelophysid, compared to Coelophysis, of course, and you can see the difference, especially in the head shape. But it cut a much more Jurassic Park style retro profile with the skull they did give it. And I appreciated that. I like that. It looks completely at home alongside like the 93 Raptor, Dilophosaurus, and the other 93 animals. So I hope they follow this pattern kind of going forward. If they use an animal from that's supposed to conceptually be from the novels or the classic trilogy, it should follow that vibe, right? It should look slightly more retro, like a 90s dinosaur. And then I am 100% happy to have paleo accurate designs for everything else. I think that's great. Let's see other things here. So some people have complained about this. Of course, it was not something anybody expected for the pack here for the final animal. I think it's a good include, not just because it's in the novel, but we haven't had a new ornithopod for like, I don't know, 6 years or something silly. I think Dryosaurus and JWE1 was literally the last time they added a new ornithopod to the game. So this is like incredibly overdue. To be fair, we did get, Iguanodon and Tyrannosaurus variants, the, Dominion Parasaurus skin. So there have been some, fresher models for some ornithopods, but this is the first all new animal since JWE1 in this type. We talked before about Oryctodromeus / Orodromeus, the two animals I can never keep apart. One of those is known to be a burrower. So that would have been an interesting opportunity to do something very different with this animal by making it a burrower. How would they have done that? That's not for me to determine. That's their problem. If they wanted to make it a burrower, they'd have to figure out how to represent that in game. But it would have been interesting. I've also seen some people complain about this animal being in the Wetlands pack because you don't typically associate this as a wetlands animal. The thing is, the vast majority of fossil specimens are preserved in aquatic environments, be they floodplains or things like that, right? And that includes Hypsilophodon. So technically, this is a wetlands animal in the sense that like 75% of discovered dinosaurs are wetlands animals. I am not opposed to it. We saw this in JWE2 with some of the packs where there was kind of the last animal that was a bit of a stretch for the pack. We had the Pack Managers collection, which had 3 highly requested species, and then Thanatos Dracon. We had the Cretaceous Predator pack that had 3 predators, and then a Gigantoraptor that couldn't even hunt. Like, this is perfectly in line with the previous packs being a fairly loose collection in terms of what they're actually called, right? My working theory is the devs in this game have more of a plan for what they want to put into the game, and less of it's not planned by like by DLC, right? They have a list, I think, of the animals they want to put in the game, and then they go through that list and they say, well, we can make this into a pack, we can make this into a pack, we can make this into a pack. I think that is what happens in this game, truly. The big piece of evidence I have for that take is how they handled the remaining Camp Cretaceous species in JWE2, where we got Tarbosaurus, Nothosaurus just in random packs. where they would fit the theming, right? They had a plan that they wanted the remaining Camp Cretaceous animals, except for Smilodon, to be added to the game. And then they just found packs they would fit in and put them in. Um, I think that is how these DLCs are at least planned in the short term. Maybe they only plan 3 or 4 at a time, but I think that is how this works. So I think it's possible that they wanted to add Hypsilophodon, and they had a list of 3 or 4 DLCs they were thinking about, and then they said, "Well, we can put in the Wetlands pack. That's fine." Um, yeah, and so this is from like the Wessex formation. That's like an arid formation generally, but it also has wetlands because that's where the fossils were preserved. So this is all a very roundabout way to say like technically it's fine. Um, so yeah, I let's talk a little bit more about the inclusion of this animal in the game in general. I said before, of course, that this is a novel species, and I think that is why we got it. Hypsilophodon, however you want to say it, does have a good fair bit of name recognition to it. It's not an obscure dinosaur, but it is this small size class of animals that are not the most exciting in the game, right? And we did just get Psittacosaurus and Protoceratops, 2 other fairly small beaky animals. So I think the only reason, honestly, this thing got into the game is because it is from the novel. And that, I think, has been the incentive for putting other certain animals into the game. Pterodactylus is also from the novel, and really only the novel as far as the franchise is concerned. I mean, it's in like comic books and like some other games, but it's in those because it was in the novel. And I think that's the only reason Pterodactylus made the pterosaur roster in JWE2 at launch, was because it was a way to include another animal from the novel. Now, of course, we don't even have, and we're not quite there yet on the full novel roster, even for just the 15 species in the park. We're missing Othnielia, we're missing Procompsognathus. And I think getting Othi and Procomp are going to be bigger stretches. I don't think the Hypsy being included guarantees the other 2 coming, just because Procomp is already competing with Compy and Coelophysis and Stegosaurus. It's very that section of the roster is very crowded. I can't see them adding a 3rd small Coelophysoid. Othi's a little more likely, or Nanosaurus if you want to go with the modern term. I think that could happen, but it would be very similar to this animal. Maybe they make it a little more gracile, a little more thinner or something, but it would still be very similar. It'd be really weird to see Othi in like the next DLC pack. And I do think if they do add Othnielia to the game, it should be called Othnielia. I personally do not want it added if it's going to be called Nanosaurus. I want it to be added in a way where it would fit the late 80s, early 90s Jurassic Park novel aesthetic, and that includes it being named Othnielia. Anyway, I do think it's possible we see some other novel species going forward. The more likely inclusions would be like Mosaurus. When we get prosauropods, finally, it's got to happen. It's got to happen. I think not including Mosaurus would be a mistake. Plateosaurus is probably the first one we get. That's probably the top of the list. That thing is the prototypical prosauropod. It's on everybody's lists, but I think it's perfectly reasonable to get 2 in the game, and we should have Mosaurus. There's also things like Ornitholestes, Silurus, that are in the novel that we could get. I mean, Hadrosaurus is another animal from the original park. I didn't mention it earlier when I talked about Othi and Procomp, but like, we do need another Hadrosaur in this game at some point, but Hadrosaurus is not really on anybody's list except for mine. But it could happen technically. I do think seeing the Hypsilophodon here means we aren't going to get like a dedicated novel DLC at any point. I don't think that'll happen. I think this is so it being included does not guarantee a novel DLC. It does not guarantee any more novel animals, right? When they're thinking about animals to add, if it's in the novel that gives it a boost, it doesn't guarantee it, right? So we can't assume this is going to follow the later seasons of Camp Cretaceous template of sprinkling these into multiple packs. But I wouldn't be surprised if it followed that, right? That's what I'm saying. Is I think this could be one and done, but I also think it could be indicative of some more novel animals coming. And the other reason I think we get some more novel animals is because there's kind of a lack of franchise things to sprinkle in at this point, right? Like we had like JWE1's DLCs were essentially almost all franchise deep cuts. It was finishing the JPOG roster, it was getting the unseen animals from the original park added, and it was things like Euoplocephalus from literally the novels, right? And then when it came to 2, they didn't have as much to pick from. So in 2, we got a lot more animals they added just because they flushed out the roster in a nice way, or they wanted to. And they sprinkled in little things here and there. They were able to use the Camp Cretaceous animals to season the DLCs. We got Stegosaurus, Microceratus. Some deep cuts were still left, right? But at this point, now, like, the only deep cut animals we're missing from, like, the film franchise are, like, Teratophonius and Peloroplides, and, like, the DPG list animals, which are probably not really canon anymore. There's those things. They could do some of those, sure. I think some of those are likely. But the big thing that's still relatively untouched, I think, is the novel animals, where there is, I think, plausibly a good 4 or 5 animals they could pluck from the novels out of the remaining, 8 or so that we don't have in the game. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say about this. I am very happy with this animal. I am. This is. It's weird, right? I really like the Irritator, but this is at least second for me. Honestly, Oshiraptor is my third favorite in this pack because a new ornithopod makes me very happy. A novel canon animal makes me very happy. Like this is what I want from the game. I'm sorry, but Hypsilophodon haters sound off in the comments. One more thing before we sign off for today. I noticed this on the webpage. The Hypsilophodon was an omnivorous dinosaur. They're giving this guy omnivory? This is not in the video. I haven't seen anybody mention this. But this says he's an omnivore. But then, like, it goes on to talk about shearing off plant material. And then if you look down here further, it just says ground paleobotany for the diet. So I don't know. Egg batch size 1 to 4. This is different than the video too. Is this just wrong? I mean, it just might be wrong, honestly. But yeah, weird. I mean, we'll find out soon enough because the pack is coming like next week or whatever, right? But yeah, it is strange. It is very strange that it's flagged here as an omnivore in the description, but then nothing else anywhere actually implies this to be an omnivore. Also, we can look at the screenshots sort of real quick. Boom. Very nice little screenshot of the juvenile interaction and just kind of another little money shot thing. Oops, I didn't, sorry. We'll reframe that there. Just a kind of another shot of the family unit here and the biome with swamp decorations. The same kind of stuff they've been showing us, right? And here's the other one again. Sorry. So yeah, that's everything. We'll leave it here. Pack will be out next week. We'll see. We'll see if this guy eats meat. Watch this thing just like hunt people. That'd be crazy. Just pulls out a knife, stalks somebody.